All right. We're going to continue this week with more tags because that's essentially what HTML is. HTML is essentially a set of tags. If you want to know how to put some content on your page, the question is, what kind of tag do you need to use? All right. And then beyond that, we learned about attributes. Attributes are associated with tags. All right. So for example, the A attribute that we looked at last week always has an href attribute because it doesn't make sense to say I have a link unless you say what is a link to. So you need more information. Just saying it's a link isn't enough. So it's not enough to say I have a link. You have to say a link to what? And we studied a couple different ways that that can be done. We can specify a link to a different section of the page. We can specify a link that brings up our email client. We can specify a link that goes to a different section of the page. Or we can specify a link that goes to another person's page or another one of our pages. And I think I mentioned one thing twice. I don't remember which one, but I had one extra thing in there. All right, so we're going to start off looking at several tags all at once. And then we'll go on to look at images and maybe a start of styling. And I'm going to go to W3 Schools, which is a site that I recommend, especially for people just learning HTML, CSS, etc. And we're going to look under formatting. This is covered in your text, I believe. I think in one of the chapters that we talked about this on the syllabus. I forget the number of it, but I think it's the one that is covered for this week or last week. And this is about text formatting because we can format text all different kinds of ways because there's different kinds of text. For example, there is bold text. You can have text in italics. You can have subscripts. For example, if I wanted to write H2O, when you write that, normally the H is normal, the 2 is a little bit below the line, and the O is normal again. Or superscripts, like if I had a footnote to something on my page. Or if I wanted to say x squared plus y squared equals c squared, or something like that. So all these work the same. This is a nice thing in that it shows you the HTML on one side, and it shows you what it looks like on another. And I can play with it to see how it would look under certain conditions. So I could say, for example, H two maybe I can say it if I can type. Oh, and then I click run, and it shows me what that looks like. All right. Or I could say x to the second power. That will look like that. Now, there's a lot of tags in HTML, and it's difficult to memorize all of them. All right. What's likely going to happen is you will remember the tags that you use all the time. So a paragraph tag, that's easy enough to remember. Links, you're going to probably have links on every page that you create. Headings, body, those kinds of things are all things that you're going to use all the time. You'll probably know those, just off the top of your head. Some of these other tags, though, it's okay if you have to look them up. As long as you remember you can do this. Like, oh, I remember I can do superscript in HTML. How do I do it? And then you can look up superscript. Let's look at some of the other ones. This one is bold text, which is a B tag. There's also a tag that a lot of people prefer, which is the strong tag, which means that it's strongly emphasized, and it also will make it bold. By default, it will make it bold. Either the end of this lecture or next lecture, we're going to start talking about CSS. And CSS overrides the default rules of the browser. So, for example, maybe we don't want bold to be thicker fonts. Maybe we want the bold to be larger fonts, or strong rather, strongly emphasized to be larger fonts. We could do that via CSS. All right, let's look at some of the other ones. Text is bold, text is italic. And here's a bunch of them. Bold text, important text, italics, emphasize, marked text, smaller text, deleted text, inserted text, subscript, superscript. Why would you ever want to have deleted text on your HTML page? They show an example here. My favorite color is blue, then they put it in a delete tag and red. And it shows the word blue has a line through it because it's deleted. Why would you ever want to do that and show deleted text on a page? Why would you not just delete it? Any thoughts? Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, it does that, but why would I want to even show it in the first place if it's wrong? I could just delete it like this. And it would show that, Why confuse the issue by saying this? To show that it's been corrected, to show that it's been changed, we get into this a lot with some of the documents that we deal with here at school. For example, if it used to be that CISS216 was a prerequisite for a course, and now CISS216 is a prerequisite for a course, we'll not just get rid of that text, we'll put the delete mark to show that that has changed. And sometimes it's important for rules to say that, hey, the rule has changed. That sort of highlights the fact that it's different now. And you could say, for example, every employee gets 2 weeks vacation after their first year. And maybe they changed it to 3 weeks vacation. Well, you could have 2 weeks crossed out 3 weeks. That way anyone reading that would see, well, it used to be 2 and now it's 3. So it's just something that you can do if you want to. The nice thing is with CSS, we can actually make those deleted texts disappear if we didn't want them cluttering up the page. All right, so we could have them there, but make them disappear. This is if text is inserted, it's underlined by default. Subscript we talked about, superscript we talked about. And there's a whole list of these. Let's see if there's any more. Oh, quotation and citation. The block quote. The block quote is usually used if you have like a long quote, a quote of several sentences. So here is a quote from WWF's website. And there's the quote. And it's enclosed in a block quote tag. And it has a cite attribute to it, cite, C-I-T-E, which says to where it is from. A Q is for a small quote. An ABBR is for abbreviation. This is nice because you can put your mouse over it and you can show what that means. Like the WHO was founded in 1948. Well, what does WHO mean? It means World Health Organization. I'm not going to dwell on these. Go through this page on W3 Schools on your own and read through whatever chapter it is about formatting text. and start to use these where it makes sense to use these. You don't have to force it. You don't have to use every tag you know on every page that you make. But if you have a long quote, use a block quote tag. If you have text that you want to emphasize, either use the M or the strong tag to emphasize them. All right, now we're going to get in a little bit more fun, because so far all our pages have looked the same, just have been text formatted a certain way. Now we're going to start to get into a little bit more in individuality in pages. And we're going to do that, first of all, by covering the images tag, which allows us to put images on our page. And then we're going to look at CSS, or cascading style sheets. And we'll probably get to at least an introduction of CSS today. All right, let me go down to Canvas and pull down an example I have. All right, first I'm going to look at the page. Okay, let's look at these. I have two pages. I have this page, and I have this page. And this page has an image on it of a sunflower. Yay, we're going to start making our pages look a little more exciting by being able to put images on them. All right, well, how do we put an image on our page? Well, we should already basically know the answer to that, right? There's probably a tag that allows us to say, hey, this is an image. All right. Do we think that tag is going to have an attribute or not? Yeah, because there could be a million images on a website. We have to say which image we want. So therefore, there's an image tag that has an attribute of the source of the image. And let's look at that. I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code, which is a free program that you can get, and it's similar to Notepad or Notepad++, but it's kind of cool for a number of reasons. And I'd like to be able to zoom in. Control plus. There we go. Thank you. I'm so bad at keyboard shortcuts. All right. That's yeah, that's sort of a weakness of mine. All right. Most of this page should be review, right? We have our doc type, our HTML tag, our head, and then our body. Okay. Inside the body is the header, which is these lines up here. We then have our navigation, which links to different sections of the page. This links to the programming section. What is a programming section? This thing that has an ID of programming. So if we click that link, oh, I'm on the wrong page. There we go. We're going to forget about this tag for right now. We're going to come back to it in a minute here. All right. In fact, I'm going to cut that so it isn't distracting. All right. We have our body with our header. We have our link back to the original page, back to home. Remember, because it's in the same folder, all we have to do is specify the name of the file. All right, so we don't have to put any directory. In fact, if you see a list of directories in front of it, you probably have done it wrong. All right, because it will not work when I download it to my machine. Because my machine, I have different directories than you do. So if it's in the same folder, it should just be literally just the name of the file with the file extension. Now, the file extension of those letters are after the period. And in Windows, you can show those by saying, where do you show that? There's an option somewhere to show the file extension. Options. Oh, yeah. Hide extension for known file types. I have that unchecked. So that's always going to show the extension, which as a developer, you want that to happen because you want to see the exact complete file name. You should have yours off. Should not show the file extensions. All right, on to the image tag. The image tag is the image IMG, is the tag IMG. IMG means an image. There are two attributes that we're going to use with the image tag. One of them is the source attribute, which is abbreviated SRC. That is the name of the file that we want to display. All right. And again, same rules apply. If it's in the same folder as the HTML page is, notice that image is in the same folder as my HTML page is in, then all I do is specify the name of the file, 1.jpg. Here's another case where it's important to know the exact file name, because a JPEG file can actually be JPG, JPEG, JPE. All right, there's three things that a JPEG file can have as an extension. We need to know the exact one, because if we use the wrong one, it's not going to display the image. Let's break it on purpose and see what happens. If I were to type in JPEG here instead of JPG, notice that little broken image symbol appears. And along with a picture of sunflowers taken in autumn, right? In other words, if you cannot display the image, it will display the alt attribute. All right. Here's where it's a nice thing to use Visual Studio Code. Notice if I put my mouse on the alt attribute, it will tell us what the alt attribute is used for. All right, so the alt attribute is used in some cases to display if that image is not displayed properly. And why is the image not displayed properly? Because we did not use the correct name. We change it back, save it, we get our image back. The alt attribute is used in other cases too. It's used when people are accessing the web page via assistive technology. All right. People that are visually impaired have software that read the screen to them, that narrates the screen to them. And there's a number of things. There's one that's built into Windows. There's a screen reader. Probably on your phone, there's an option to do that. I turn mine on accidentally every now and then. All right, but the idea is that if you can't read the screen, this software reads the screen to you. And with it, people that are visually impaired can access pages on the web. All right. However, the screen reader can't describe a picture. They're not sophisticated enough to be able to look at that JPEG file and say, oh, those are sunflowers. All right. That's where you need to supply an alt attribute. The alt attribute is what screen readers are going to narrate to people using a screen reader. All right. And therefore, people that are visually impaired, they are not going to be able to see the picture. However, they will get a sense of what's there at least. All right. Another example would be if you had a graph on your page. All right. You might have a graph on your page showing the average temperatures in Ohio, you know, and you could have an alt attribute that says, you know, graph that shows average temperatures in Ohio. For January, it's 12 degrees. For February, it's 15 degrees, whatever. All right. And that way the people can get the information, even though they can't actually see the graph. So with very few exceptions, it's important that you always have the source and the alt attribute for an image. You're always going to have the source. And there's only a handful of exceptions where you're not going to be using the alt attribute. So every image has both a source and an alt image. Now, here's a little shortcut that we take. If I put a slash greater than sign, that means that this tag is a starting tag and ending tag all rolled into one. Now, interestingly enough, I don't have to do that. I could just do like that. Or I could do like this. That's one thing I don't like about this software. Sometimes it decides for you what you want. But I could go like that. All right. But what I usually do is I usually do this, because I like to make sure all my starting tags have ending tags. And if there is no need for an ending tag, I use the shortcut of slash greater than sign at the end. All right. A couple things to note. With this and with links, these attributes are inside the tag. That is, they're between the less than sign and the greater than sign. So the href is not a tag by itself, and neither is the source. It's part of the tag. It's between the less than and greater than sign. Any questions about that? Now, what are ways that you can obtain images for your projects? Google. Is it legal to Google, find an image, and then use it on your web page? The correct answer, there's always a trick, right? Professors always ask questions deviously to see if to get to the trick answer. The trick answer is it depends, all right? It depends on a couple of things. First of all, you can always get the owner of the image's permission. You know, if you went to my site and found a photograph that you like, you could always email me and say, hey, could I use that? And then it would be like, sure, just give me credit. All right. Or if you are working on a school project, you have the ability to use things that you find on the web without explicitly getting permission, provided you give it credit. Just like you would footnote something on a written paper. You would give a credit and say that the image is from such and such place. All right? Yes. There are. All right, that's an excellent point. There's other ways to get images besides those two. One is there are certain images that are said to be in the Google or said to be in the public domain. For example, very old pictures. Copyrights only last a limited amount of time. I'm not a lawyer, I don't remember the number of years, but after they're older than a certain amount of time, they're in what's called the public domain, which means that anyone can use them. Even if they're not older than that, people can just put images in the public domain. For example, I think if you go to NASA's website, all their images they put in the public domain, which means you can use them. So you can use them if you're doing a school project. All right. There's a document, I think, in week 1 that describes this in more detail, so you should look at. You could also look for things in the public domain or things that are licensed with a Creative Commons license. And Creative Commons means that the person that put this out there allows people to use it with maybe some restrictions. Like maybe you can use it as long as you're not a business doing this for profit. Or maybe you can use the image, but you're not allowed to alter the image, and so on. Let's look at the Google search for images and show what we mean by this. So if we go to Google Images search, and if we search for sunflowers, let's say. All right, there's a whole bunch of images. I have no idea if any of these are copyrighted or not. My assumption would be, if you don't know, that they are copyrighted. But I can go under More and then unclick that because that's not the right choice. Not Safe Search. Where is the option? Tools. There we go. Under Tools, we have usage rights. So if it's licensed by Creative Commons license, I can click that and get a list of all the pictures that are licensed under Creative Commons license. I would assume that these ads don't fall into that category, that they're just advertisements. But this image, for example, is licensed under the Creative Commons license, which means that you're free to use it, and you can find more information about the license by visiting the page and seeing what it says. All right, the point is that we want to respect copyright law in this class. I don't want federal agents bursting into my class and arresting me, all right, in the middle of the class because I didn't teach this properly. So I want you to respect copyright law. You don't need to obsess about it, but if you use an image from somewhere, just put credit somewhere. Like maybe put credit in the footer that says this image is from such and such page. You know, if you had one about the Cleveland Browns, you're allowed to use it because you're a student, all right? If you were making a business website, you couldn't use it. But as a student, you can use it. Just put in the footer image from, and then give the page that you found the image on, all right? Pretty simple. It's a good idea in some cases to edit your image. In other words, and this is less of a problem than it used to be. Let's say I want this image 2 on my page. It's a bigger picture of the sunflower. All right. Let's change image 1 to image 2. Now when I look at the page, I got this giant image. Wow, that's way too big for the page. All right. What can I do to fix that? Well, there's actually attributes and there's things we can do to make it smaller. We can specify the height and width. But probably the best thing to do is to actually edit the image itself. All right? Because no matter what, it's still downloading the entire image, even if I size it via the attributes or through CSS. And this is a fairly big image. Again, this is less of an issue than it used to be several years ago, right? Because internet speeds are so fast these days. But this is a 3 megabyte file. That's pretty big. If you have a bunch of these on a page, it could actually slow a page down. So I'm going to edit this to make it smaller. And if I edit it, though, I'm going to make a copy of it first. Never edit the original, all right? Keep the original because you can never make an image bigger. If you make it smaller and you try to make it bigger, you've lost the detail in that image. And it's not going to be very well, the resolution of it's not going to be very good. So make a copy of it, keep it off to the side, and then you can edit this image. And you don't have to be an expert in this, but just be familiar with some basic tools. We're going to edit with photos and I don't even know where you resize it on this. I'm going to crop it. Crop it means just take a section of it. You can also actually resize it. I just don't remember how to do it in photos. I don't see the option. Then I can save it. And then I have that, which really is no smaller, but you get the idea. All right. If we had more time, I'd Google how to resize in photos, but I trust you can do it. And you don't have to use photos. If you have Photoshop, you can use that. There's a free open source application called GIMP, which is used to edit photos, which is really, really good to have. It does virtually all the things that Photoshop does, but it's free, which is always a good sign. All right. Here's the last thing we're going to talk about today. We made it through images. All right. Are there any questions about what we have so far? All right. Now, changing the appearance of the page. I'm going to change this back to image 1. Your web browser has certain defaults. Okay. Let's briefly run through the defaults. And we'll talk about them. And keep in mind that any of these defaults you can change using the language CSS. All right. CSS is a different language than HTML. HTML is used to create the content on a web page. CSS is about the appearance of a web page. So if we look at this web page, we can describe the appearance of it. The background of it is white. The text is black. The link is blue if we have not visited the link, and it's purple or magenta if we have visited the link. The font is, I believe, Times New Roman. An H1 is in bigger font. The H2 is in slightly smaller font. And the H3, 4, 5, and 6 are smaller still, and so on. Those are all aspects of the appearance of the page. Every single one of them we can change via CSS. All right? So content versus appearance. if you're trying to decide whether you need to change the CSS or the HTML, you ask yourself, am I changing the content of the page or I'm changing the way it looks? So for example, if I were to say I want to add another paragraph here, well, a paragraph is content, so therefore I would change the HTML. If I were to say I want to make this paragraph green, well, that doesn't change the content, it just changes the appearance of it. Therefore, I would change the CSS. So, CSS, we're going to start by putting the CSS right in our HTML page. All right. This is one way to do CSS. And we start with a style tag. The style tag is like the city limits tag, saying that you have left HTML land and you're now in style land. So everything between the start and end style tag is not HTML code, but is CSS code. All right, CSS code works this way. I specify an HTML tag. In this case, I'm going to specify body. What's the body? Well, it's everything between the start body and the end body tag. In other words, it's all this content here. I'm going to specify that the body we want to change these things about it. Let's change the background color. And what do I want to change it to? And this is where I give my speech about how you kids have it easy these days, because the tool actually makes suggestions to us of what the color should be. All right, and it shows us what colors we're allowed to use. I'll show you another way, either in a few minutes or next week. But let's say I want beige as or let's make bisque the background color. All right. If I do that and save the page and refresh it, it now has that as a background color. So yay, your web page no longer has to look like everyone else's. Right? You can change the background color of your page. What else can I do? Well, I can change the color of the text. And I'm not doing this to look pretty. I'm doing this so it stands out. Let's make the text purple. Ignore that little color swatch that it puts before that. That's just a little tip for you. That's not actually in the text of the file. And there's a page with it doesn't look as bad as I thought it would. The color of the text is that. The color of the background is beige. Now, what gets those colors? Everything in the body. All right. Now, what if I want something different for a different section of the page? Let's say the header of the page. Let's say I want to flip those colors around and make the background purple and the text be beige. All right. That's where I can put in a new style rule. All right. And I can say the header section of the page, I want the color, or I want the background color to be beige, or purple rather, and the color to be beige. So now it looks like that. Now, let's make sure we understand how this works. Because CSS rules go from the most specific to the most general. So if we look at this page, there's two style rules. There's a style rule for the body, and there's a style rule for the header. The way the browser applies it is that everything in the body gets these colors. However, the stuff in the header gets these colors. All right. Header is a more specific description of this content than just saying something in the body, right? So something in the header tag is more specific than saying something in the body. Therefore, the header tag CSS rule overrides what's in the body. So like the inner overrides the outer. If I were to do this, if I were to put in a style rule for H2, and say background color white, color red, then this is going to get white background red text. Everything else in the header tag, like this, is going to get background color of purple and beige font. And then everything else in the body is going to get a beige background and a purple font. Any questions about this? Now that I just did for demonstration purposes, that looks ugly. All right. Now, you should pay attention to the colors that you use, right? Because you can make a page virtually unreadable. For example, if I made the color of the text yellow instead of purple, almost looks like that text isn't there. You can barely see it. All right. Why is this text not yellow? Right, because I didn't change the heading and the head or the header, and the header applies more than the body. All right. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this altogether. All right. What color do you think the text is going to be now? I haven't specified a color for the body. It's going to be the default, exactly, of black. All right. So it's important to keep in mind that the way your page looks from now on is a combination of two things: the browser defaults plus what you change via CSS. So I didn't set the color for that. Therefore, I still get the default color of black. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is putting the CSS rules in a file all their own. All right. I can put the HTML or put the style stuff right in the page, or And if I do this, it is broke because I did something wrong. I'm going to Google this real quick. HF rel equals style sheet. Oh, rel equals style sheet. I think the type you no longer need. You used to need it. Okay. All right, and I got that. Now, I sort of made this style sheet in advance. Let's take a look at it. All right, I changed the background. Interesting, I used almost the same background in this example. This example I did a couple years ago. I don't even remember doing it. So used about the same color. And this I did the same thing. And I have a font size of 4M. Font size of 4M means 4 times bigger than the default. So that's why these H1s are like really big. But if we do this, the advantage of doing this is I can put this style sheet on every single one of my pages. I can put it on this page too. And then I can go back to home and looky there. The home has the same page as my tutorial page. This is a good way of making your pages look consistent. And that's a goal of web development. That's a goal of web design, is to make your pages look consistent. You want to give the user sort of a sense of where things are on the page and what different things mean. And one way to do that is to be consistent. Pick any of your favorite websites and visit several pages there. You'll notice that they all sort of have the same look and structure. Well, they can do that by having a common CSS file. Now, I didn't talk about these color codes here. This # FFDAAA, we'll talk about that next time. We're already a little ahead of the game, so that's okay. We didn't get to talk about them today. But you can look up HTML color codes and it will show you what those are, and we'll talk about those more next Monday. Are there any questions? All right, we'll see you over in lab.